you guys, so wanted to come on and chat, and today we'll go over some of the top news that we've seen in the rideshare and the gig economy, and we'll also cover pretty much all of your questions that you might have. I know there's a lot going on in all different areas of your life, whether it's personal, business, and hopefully I can provide some assistance, some support. Really appreciate everyone who's tuning in to these live sessions. If you guys are watching live on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, wherever we're streaming right now, you can actually go ahead and chime in the comments, and I'll be able to see your comments, and I will hopefully be able to respond to them live. So if you're on YouTube, for example, on mobile, you can just close out, I believe, of the window, and then you can see the chat, or give it a thumbs up. So whatever you want to do there. And then if you guys are watching after the fact, you can always leave a comment and I'll do my best. Or if you just have a question, you guys know you can always email me, harry@therideshareguy.com. So with that being said, I'm already making money before this YouTube live has even started. I see Dan has chipped in $5 and $21 on Super Chat over on YouTube. So I'm obviously going to have to go straight to Dan, because I made $26 before I even logged on, and now I'm thinking about what I'm going to be ordering for dinner. So I think I'm going to be doing some Greek food. So thank you, Dan. That'll be a nice solo meal for myself. He says, how soon would Uber and Lyft go to 100% electric vehicle? How would those incentives go national? So this is actually very timely, Dan, because one of the things that Uber announced today, which we haven't done a video on yet because I didn't think it was huge news, but we did do an article, which I'll leave a link to now. But basically, Uber announced today that they have a 2040 zero emissions goal, which basically means that they're trying to convert their fleet. Basically they want all their vehicles to be electric by the year 2040. And Lyft, actually, if you remember, came out with a similar announcement saying that by 2030 they wanted all their vehicles to be electric. So Lyft does it, and then a few weeks later Uber does it. I wonder if there's any coincidence. Obviously, you guys know that these companies love to copy each other, so I'm going to go ahead and I will leave a link. Let's see if that link came up right now for you guys, and you can go check out our article on the Uber zero emissions plan and the Lyft zero emissions plan. But basically, to answer your question, Dan, right now, about 1% of Lyft's fleet is electric vehicles. And the reason why I know that is because I just interviewed Lyft's director of sustainability all about this push. So I'm glad you asked this question, because I've been digging into this a lot. That podcast should come out early next week. So take a look at that on YouTube or over on iTunes, therideshareguy.com/iTunes, if you guys are interested in learning about that. But basically, that's to say, 99% of cars right now in Lyft's fleet, and probably Uber's fleet also, are not electric. So, either hybrids or, just regular old ICE, internal combustion engine. And, the issue is that there's that big sort of upfront cost with electric vehicles right now, right? I mean, if you go out and buy a Chevy Volt, for example, which is an electric car, a great car, it's got 220 miles of range. You used to be able to rent one through Maven Gig to drive for Uber and Lyft, which was pretty cool, but Maven got rid of that rental program for Uber and Lyft drivers, so you can't rent those cars from them anymore. But, basically the difference between that and sort of Chevy's comparable model, it's thousands of dollars. It might be like, $10,000 or $15,000. Now, certain car companies still have a $7,500 federal incentive. So Tesla and GM, for example, they've already used up all of their $7,500 incentives, but other new electric makers still have that federal incentive. So that's one way to really get the cost down. But yeah, so I think, long story short, Dan, I think it's going to be a while before we see any of those electric vehicles, in kind of large numbers. A lot is going to have to happen. So if you are interested in that, Dan, I recommend you go check out my interview that's going to be coming out next week with Lyft's guy, Sam Aarons. And I see a couple familiar faces in here, so just want to give a quick shout out to you guys. Appreciate everyone joining. Maybe I'll handle this question real quick. Alton says, any suggestions for a Toyota Mirai hydrogen car? So a lot of questions right now about the electric and eco-friendly options. So I don't actually know a ton about the Toyota Mirai other than it's hydrogen, and I think it's a bit of a hassle to fill up. It looks like, I just Googled it right now, the MSRP is $59,000, which is pretty expensive for a regular looking sedan that kind of looks like a Prius, but it does get MPG 66 city, 66 highway. So I'm not sure how that correlates, and to be honest, it's not something I know a ton about. But my friend Karan, if you're watching, he knows a lot about the Mirai, so I'll have to ask him and get back to you. So back to my shout outs. So Real Rideshare Stories, what's up, Chris? How are you doing? And appreciate you coming on. Jesse says, congratulations on the Greek dinner. Let me know what you guys are having for dinner. I guess it's 4 o'clock my time in Pacific, 7 o'clock East Coast. So maybe you guys have had some dinner yet, but let me know what you guys are up to. Rick says hello. And he also, Rick over on YouTube, says that he likes my new look. So yeah, if you guys haven't noticed, I'm rocking the goatee. This is taking me a few weeks to grow out. You know, my hair doesn't grow out that fast. And then also I'm rocking the no haircut look, right? That's why I've got the hat. So I haven't gotten a haircut in quite a while. So I figured I'd wear a hat and spare you guys. But my barber did just text me and said that they're going to be opening, I think maybe for outdoor cuts or something like that. Somehow they're opening back up within whatever local regulations are. So I think I'm going to go and get a haircut with my mask on pretty soon. So the next time I go live, hopefully I'll look a little less shaggy. But let me know what you think about the look. And also, I think that might be a good idea for the giveaway. You know, at the end of this, maybe we'll go for 30, 45 minutes. At the end of this, maybe I'll give out a few hats. You might just have to send me a picture of your quarantine haircut. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned to the end, and you'll have the chance to win one of these FlexFit hats, which I actually think are really nice, and they're kind of expensive. So it's a good little giveaway for you guys. All right, let's keep answering some questions. And I saw one, it said, Peter said, you still do this Q&A? I haven't seen you for a month. Yeah, so it's been about a month since I last did my Q&A. So I'm back, and if you guys are enjoying these, obviously I can continue doing them. I was doing them very frequently during quarantine, and hopefully it's sort of like I wouldn't say we're getting out of all the quarantine and pandemic stuff, but it seems like it's getting better in California at least. Let's see. So yeah, Peter, hopefully you enjoyed that. And if you guys do want to take a quick second to give this video a thumbs up on whatever platform you're watching, that's always helpful for me to for the channel to spread the word and for us to continue to do these. So if you're watching live on YouTube, for example, I think you just have to close out of the live chat, and then you can give the video a thumbs up or whatever platform you're on. And Dan said, here's the $10 for baby formula. I appreciate that. If you guys are listening carefully, you might be able to hear my newborn in the background crying. Let's give it a quick pause. Yeah, you should definitely be able to hear that if you turn the volume up. So I'll take care of that afterwards. And I see Dave, the Uber slave, is in here. He says, it seems shady Uber is making fake accounts on YouTube to trick people into voting against drivers' interest. I haven't seen that, Dave. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, but if you have a little more info, definitely send that to me. I know that there's been a lot of stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about, Prop 22, which is this big proposition in California that is frankly super important for all cities and states, because if it passes in California, or whatever ends up happening in California, I think is going to be very key to what happens in other places. So that's why it's an important thing to keep an eye on. Yeah, I haven't seen that, Dave, but basically my point was that, these, I guess you would say, a lot of times when you outsource this to like the marketing or the PR or whatever, all the different agencies they're using, sometimes they can go and do some maybe shady stuff, right? I saw a story about one of the lawyers that's sort of always been for, I guess, AB5, Vina Dubal. She had some issues with Uber and Lyft, or I guess Uber, the Yes on Prop 22 campaign. She felt they were targeting them and things like that. So wouldn't put it past them, but definitely feel free to keep me posted on that. Dave, Dan, wow, really chipping in with the all of the, what do you call them, super chats. Appreciate that. Another $5 and $10. He says, get a couple bottles. I think you mean a baby formula. Linda says, goatee looks terrible. Walrus comes to mind. Just my opinion. Don't like them. However, long, sexy mustaches are great. So if you guys are curious as to the way to Linda's heart, a long, sexy mustache will work. Tom says hi from Phoenix, Arizona. And Peter says, do not do an interview with Dara, Uber CEO, with this look. And don't worry, I reserve this goatee, no haircut look for you guys. So hopefully you enjoy it. And Superman says, Harry, dust those crumbs off of your chin. So I'm not saying I look great with a goatee, but I'm just saying, we're all during quarantine. You got to do something to stay sane. Peter says, has prices on Uber changed since drivers can now set their prices in California? So we covered these changes that Uber has been making kind of in response to AB5 that's allowing drivers to set their own rates within some reason, I guess you would say. Now drivers have the ability to go up or go down and, during surge and things like that. And what I will say is that it's definitely messing a lot with the marketplace. I've been calling rides here and there. Like when my babysitter comes over, I call a ride on Uber for her to get home. And especially right when they rolled out this feature, I noticed that prices were all over the place. And so what Uber is now doing on the passenger side, they've kind of gone back to giving a range. And so they'll say that, it's anywhere from $15 to $18 for this ride, for example. And even though they're still charging the riders the exact amount that drivers are getting, and based off of that commission and the service fee, but I think what they realized is that if you don't get matched with that first rider, and then it starts ping-ponging around to all these drivers, it's kind of a shitty experience for a passenger to get quoted $17 for a ride, and then it jumps up to $30, and then it's if they don't accept that, it's $25. It's very inconsistent, and so that's sort of I think Uber is really figuring out a lot of things and how that's going to work. And I think it will work out okay for both drivers and riders, because there's some interesting strategies that drivers have been telling me they're using that, are definitely, if you're kind of willing to sit out a little bit more and, drive strategically, you can definitely make a little more money by kind of, only going, setting your surge premium or your rates higher than the rest of drivers. So, that's how that's been working. Scott says, anyone know the actual pro-anti AB5 support numbers? So, we do surveys all the time. And, I think this is very controversial for some people. But for me, I think it's pretty straightforward. We just did a survey of 830 drivers, and 71% said they want to be independent contractors. And I think about 17% said they want to be employees. And I don't know, some people think this is very shocking or controversial, but most drivers are part-time. Most drivers are doing 10 to 20 hours a week or less and really value that flexibility. And while there's nothing in the text of the law of AB5 that says you'll lose flexibility, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that Uber, you can't just drive whenever and wherever you want if you're an employee, if Uber has to pay you, right? You'll have to drive in the busiest times and places. I don't know why that's controversial. So you will lose some flexibility. I don't know how you could argue against that, right? So that's sort of what the numbers I've seen, Scott, and we're going to send out a poll shortly here on support for Prop 22, because, I was against AB5 because I didn't want drivers to be employees. And now with Prop 22, I guess if you're, Uber and Lyft are sort of for Prop 22, which would put out this hybrid, kind of model where drivers get this kind of crappy minimum wage that's only counts during engaged time. So when you have a trip, basically, and some reimbursement for expenses. And personally, I just don't think it goes anywhere far enough. So I'm also kind of a no on Prop 22. So it's funny. There's some people that are sort of no on Prop 22 because they want to be employees. And there are other people like me, maybe I'm in the minority, but I'm a no on Prop 22 because I think Uber and Lyft's backs are against the wall. And I think they need to come with a way better offer. I think their compromise kind of sucks. I think that they should have done a lot more for drivers, and they kind of did the bare minimum. And, I think that they should have to pay for it. So that's my thoughts there. I would love to be able to hear, or I'd love for you guys to share your feedback right now, because this is going to be a big topic in California, as the November election rolls around. I guess it's a national one. But, like I said, a lot of other cities and states are considering similar legislation. So kind of whatever happens in California, it's a good bet that, in the next year or two, similar policies could be at least introduced in your state or your city. So hopefully that answers your question, Scott. Dave says, people say they won't be able to deduct mileage if they are employees. Rideshare will be over in California. Drivers will make less money as employees, etc. I don't know if that's a question or a statement, David, but yeah, that is what people say. So as employees, let's just talk about the facts for a second. As an employee, you will not be able to deduct your mileage, but you will be reimbursed for your mileage. And I want to share a couple good resources that we've been working on. And the first one is sort of our explainer for Prop 22. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that, we did a big blog post about Prop 22. And I'll share that with you guys there. And then what was the other resource I wanted to share? I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that, drivers, if they are employees, they do get a minimum wage, and then they will be reimbursed for mileage at the federal mileage reimbursement rate. So that's 56 or 57 cents per mile. So you think about it, the bare minimum that you're going to get as an employee is minimum wage plus however many miles you drive times the federal mileage reimbursement rate, which goes back to the fact, right? Like Uber isn't going to pay you to just wander around the city and drive and not have rides. You're going to have to work, right? And you're going to have to work hard because they're going to be paying you at least 57 cents for every single mile on top of the minimum wage, which basically just means rides are going to get more expensive, right? Like these are, I don't know, to me, like these are the facts. We can argue whether they're good or bad, but like some of these things are facts if you just think about it logically. So let me know your thoughts. Dan says, don't forget to give 2 thumbs up on the video and share to get the word out. I appreciate you, Dan. I think that's why you were and are still one of my moderators, since you're a great hype man. So I'll cut you your check later. And Dan really coming in clutch with the super chats. Appreciate that. Rick says Prop 22 has been financed $180 million by Uber, Lyft, and Grubhub. Robert says, who pays for gas if we're employees? No tax deduction. So gas is sort of included as part of that mileage reimbursement, right? That 57 cents per mile that you get, that's all of your costs. That's supposed to be all of your costs, including gas. And Dave says mileage reimbursement does not count as income, which I believe that sounds correct because it's a reimbursement. And Dave says all that was untrue. You can deduct mileage as an employee. I don't know if that's true, Dave. I don't know how you would get a reimbursement and then also be able to deduct mileage, but we can discuss that later. Feel free to send me resources. I mean, I just think about it logically, right? If you're getting paid one thing, if you're getting reimbursed one amount, I don't see how you'd also be able to get to take a deduction. And Robert, you are correct. No deductions for phone, equipment, etc. And I mean, frankly, it's like a lot of the content that we talk about, right? Like if you guys are really going out there and know what you're doing and you're making kind of at the top and you're really doing a great job of tracking all your mileage, tracking all your deductions, every time you go to meet up, with a driver or split a meal and talk strategy, like these are all deductions. And frankly, most drivers don't deduct those things. And so most people are, I guess I would say, are going to kind of benefit in a way by anything that kind of like puts an earnings floor or anything that makes it like kind of like what I call like dumbing down rideshare. I mean, you're basically, whether you realize it or not, you're running a business, and running a business is not for everyone. There are definitely some challenges. So, I think that, with all that being said, like if you now get automatically reimbursed, for example, some drivers or most drivers will benefit from that because they weren't doing it themselves, if that makes sense. So, let's see. Dave says you can't deduct the reimbursement if the reimbursement is less than 58 cents. Then you can deduct the remainder. Deduction would be allowed for mileage where not reimbursed. But I guess what I'm saying is that, so I see what you guys are saying. So anytime you are not being reimbursed by the company, you still get to deduct those miles. But what I'm saying is that if you're now an employee for Uber and Lyft, they have to pay you, right? So they're how efficient you are. Like right now, if you're like a really shitty driver and you're very inefficient and you drive all the worst times and all the worst places, like Uber and Lyft don't really care, right? But if they now have to pay you as an employee, and pay you a guaranteed hourly wage, right? Like you obviously now want all your employees to be very as efficient, even more so as efficient as possible. So that's just sort of the trade-offs that I want you guys to think about. Guy chimes in from over on Facebook. Good to see you, Guy. He says, I'm a no on Prop 22. I'm a part-time driver, can't drive on someone else's time. That's what makes rideshare awesome. Be your own boss, start and stop when you want to. So I don't know if you're a no or a yes then on Prop 22, Guy, because, that's sort of what Uber's argument is saying. I think they're saying if you vote no on Prop 22, you're in a way sort of saying that you're not saying you want drivers to be employees, but it's sort of, you're kind of not agreeing with Uber and Lyft that you want this compromise and third way. So the wording is a bit confusing, I guess I would say. Alex says, I don't raise rates Monday through Thursday, but I do raise them Friday to Sunday. So he's talking about in California where you can set your own rates. His strategy is basically during Friday to Sunday when it's a bit busier, he raises his rates and sets a premium on all of his trips. And last week he made $2,100. So I will say that, for obviously there are a lot of COVID and safety concerns right now, but for the drivers that are willing to drive for Uber and Lyft right now, especially in a lot of places, anywhere that's kind of like slowly opening up too, there is a lot of action out there and there's a lot of money to be made. I mean, it's crazy. We featured a story of a Lyft driver in Phoenix, and this was a couple months ago, to be fair. I don't know if you can still do this, but he was earning $4,000 a week. He did 80 hours in a single week, but I mean, that's a $50 an hour average, right? And so even if you do 40 hours, a more normal amount, that's $2,000 in a market like Phoenix, which was kind of unheard of in the past. I've never heard of a driver making anywhere near that until, basically the pandemic happened. So I think we have a video about that. Let's see if I can find it. I'll have to look that up later, but yeah, just to kind of, the point is, it's sort of, I just want to highlight that definitely if you're kind of willing and able in some of these situations, the earnings potential can be very high right now with rideshare. So hopefully that information is helpful. Let's see. I saw a question about masks. Masks are always a good topic. Something so simple, but obviously very controversial for some people. So let's handle that. Where'd that mask question go? Also, I saw Jay joined. Hey, Jay, thanks for joining. Looks like everyone appreciates your contribution. So thanks for joining, Jay. I'll have to find that mask question again. And Allison says, what about deadhead miles coming home from a long trip? Would we get paid for mileage? So I think that how it will most likely work is that, yeah, you will, if you're kind of on the clock, I don't think Uber is going to, send you way out into the boonies and then kick you off the app. That would be, pretty shady even for Uber, but they will, now charge that rider probably a lot more to go out to the boonies, sort of for like the same reasons right now we tell drivers, like, think about it, right? If you're in the middle of a busy downtown city center and you get a request way out to the boonies, like, frankly, from a business perspective, you often want to decline that trip if you're not going to get a ride back, or if you're going to have to sit in a ton of traffic to get back. And so those are the decisions that, frankly, like Uber and Lyft are going to start making for you if drivers were employees. And I'm curious to know if you guys think that that's a good or bad thing, but that's definitely, sort of what I say, the incentives are going to be more aligned. And that's why I don't like full employee, but I like certain aspects. Like, I think minimum wage is a good thing for drivers because it aligns the incentives between the companies and it aligns the incentives between the companies and the drivers, right? So you're not going to be able to go out there and earn, $4 an hour, even if you're a really crappy driver. Uber is going to ensure that you at least earn whatever the minimum wage is in your city. And maybe that, they make it more restrictive. They make it a little bit less flexible, but it's sort of in your best interest versus like completely limiting your upside, right? That's the one thing I'm worried about for as employee status. Like, what are the second order effects? Like, is there going to be any limiting of upside? Drivers like Jay who can go out and like really kill it. And, maybe if average drivers drivers in San Francisco are making $20 to $30 an hour, and he's $30 to $50 an hour, are those top drivers still going to be able to do that? So I'm not so sure. I think it will be very tough to see. I see Michael chiming in. Hey, Michael, I think I just replied to your email this morning. He says, what do you think a reasonable counteroffer from Uber, Lyft, etc. would be? So I think he's referring to the Prop 22. I think what I really want to see is, the things that drivers care most about: making more money, so higher rates, capping the commissions, kind of like doing something to prevent unfair deactivations. Right now, if you get deactivated, you're sort of shit out of luck and you don't have anything you can do. Maybe a cap on the number of drivers, because oversaturation is another big complaint. So what's that? 3 or 4 things right there. So, any of those, 1 or 2 of those elements, I think is important. And, even if it's sort of like a little bit of a show, so minimum wage is, in a way, paying drivers more. That's something I like. I hated the fact, though, that in Prop 22, Uber and Lyft's minimum wage was only based on online time or engaged time. So when you're with a rider. So what happens in the future? Prop 22, let's say it passes, and now they tell everyone that you get minimum wage, but they decide to flood the streets with drivers, and you're only getting a ride once every hour. That minimum wage literally means nothing now. So I think some sort of floor there, addressing one of the other sort of non-monetary structural issues, like maybe developing some third-party deactivation center. Like in Seattle, there's a really cool proposal where the city is developing a third-party deactivation center. So if you're a driver in the city of Seattle in the future and you're deactivated, you can actually go to these guys and they'll basically, kind of like an arbitration, look at your case and see if it was fair or not. And then the third thing that I would like to see is some sort of structural, bargaining or something that allows, I don't want Uber and Lyft to be able to say, okay, we're going to pay you more, and then they go and drop rates. We're going to pay you a benefits fund, an extra 5%, but then we're going to drop rates in the future, and it's now a wash. So I think those are sort of the 3 components that I would like to see, Michael, and hopefully that answers your question. Peter says, in some markets you are forced to wear a mask. I think he's talking about the mask question. I think in all markets in the US, for both drivers and riders, you're required to wear a mask now. And I mean, I think to me, I personally don't really find a mask very comfortable, but I don't have a big issue, if I'm in a grocery store, put a mask on for 15-20 minutes. If I'm going to be driving for Uber and Lyft, it's kind of part of the job. I mean, really, if you're going to be in a small confined space, you guys, sometimes I think some drivers forget that they're in the business of customer service, right? And so I think most customers want their drivers wearing a mask and vice versa. So to me, if you're in that customer service business, I think you kind of have to follow the rules, right? If you're not a people person, you probably shouldn't be taking passengers around, right? You should probably switch over to food delivery. And that's why I love the gig economy so much, because depending on your personality, you can really, there's so many different options, right? Let's say you're someone who absolutely hates wearing a mask, go switch over to food delivery. The only times you really have to wear a mask is when you go into a restaurant to pick up the food. That's what, ideally 30 seconds, maybe it's a few minutes you wait outside. You probably can't even wait out inside right now. So it's literally 30 seconds that you have to wear a mask. I don't know, to me, that's a very small inconvenience. And then you go leave it on customer's doorstep. You don't even have to wear a mask at that point. So, there are options within the gig economy depending on your personality and all of that. So Moises says, hey, Moises, he says, it's Moises Kroner from Indianapolis. Good to see you here. And let's see. Nikhil says, thoughts on Uber's shift to EVs. So I covered this a little bit at the beginning, Nikhil, but I mean, to be honest, I think both Uber and Lyft's announcements about EVs, I think it's at this point, it's a lot more PR and kind of marketing and, kind of BS than real talk. I think that I did like the Uber Green mode that could potentially pay drivers more. I interviewed Lyft's head of sustainability on my podcast. That episode should be out next week, actually. So head to therideshareguy.com/iTunes if you want to listen to that. But I think where what I want to see is just the companies put their money where their mouth is, because there's a lot that has to happen on the infrastructure, on the sort of just vehicle development front that they have no control over, the charging stations. There's sort of a lot that has to go right, in my opinion. But I do think it is going to happen eventually, and maybe the companies are just trying to get out of it ahead of time. Peter says, I put a plexiglass in my car. So I think he's talking about the sneeze barriers that I'm actually a big fan of, especially if you're full-time driving right now and you want to have passengers back there. It's not obviously a perfect seal and going to prevent coronavirus from coming from the back seat to the front. But I think about it like at a salad bar. You remember those things back in the day before coronavirus where you could go to a buffet and you would see a salad bar and they would have a sneeze guard right there, right? Because if you happen to breathe or if you happen to sneeze, it's going to collect like all the big droplets, right? So it's sort of course, it's not 100% effective, but if someone happens to sneeze, the droplets aren't going to be flying into your face, basically, right? And so I like it in that sense. We're actually going to be we're testing and reviewing a bunch of them right now. We got one from Lyft. We got a few other third-party ones. So stay tuned. We've got an article and video from our contributor, Gabe, up in the Bay Area, who's been doing some rides and testing plexiglass barriers. So that's a cool option. Dave says mileage can only be deducted if it exceeds 2% of the taxpayer's AGI. So if you don't drive this much, you should ask your employer to reimburse you instead. Yeah, you're right, Dave. That sounds correct. And to be honest, I think there's going to be maybe some loopholes, that will benefit drivers if they do end up becoming employees. But I think I'll probably wait to figure a lot of that out if it does become a reality. And let's see what other questions I see. Jay coming. Oh, Jay does have a video coming out this week on Uber Green Mode, so I think that will be pretty cool that you guys can check out. Papa Smurf, the OG, says, really appreciate what you're doing for us. Henry. Who's Henry? I'm Harry. My son's name is Henry, though, guys and girls. So he also says, Mr. Crater is very knowledgeable as well. Keep up the great videos. Much respect from Manhattan. So appreciate that, Papa Smurf. And I actually, I would love, Jay and I launched this new course over at MaximumRidesharingProfits.com. And we've been getting some feedback from New York City drivers. So I'm curious, Papa Smurf, if you've had a chance to take a look at our course, because, we didn't, New York City is very unique market from all the rest of the Uber and Lyft markets. So I'm curious how folks like yourself, if there's anything we could add to that course. So shoot me an email and we can chat about that. Alex says, the Quest bonus came back, but it's broken. It's not counting my trips. So one thing, I don't know specifically about this issue, Alex. This is kind of the first I'm hearing about it, but I have been hearing about a number of similar issues from drivers that are having small things like, the Quest is broken, or another driver has this settlement that he got from Uber and Lyft based on miles, and he thought that they weren't counting all of his trips because he had multiple vehicles. And, there's a lot of these kind of like smaller to random issues that I think a lot of drivers are having a lot of trouble getting resolved right now, right? Because there's no in-person support. And usually for this sort of more random kind of complex issues, I would tell drivers, go to in-person support if you have it, because there you can actually get, face-to-face support, sometimes employees who know what they're talking about from Uber, and not, just some third party who's never driven for Uber or Lyft and has no idea what they're talking about. And there may be a language barrier. But I'm curious to know if you guys have been having any issues with Uber and Lyft. Like, I don't know what the best way right now to get them resolved with Uber and Lyft. You kind of have to go through all the normal support channels, and the normal support channels kind of suck. So I'm actually going to pose this question to the audience. If you guys have had any success, I guess I would say, in getting good support from the companies right now when you can't go in person, let me know, and we'll take it from there. So Scott says, yeah, I'm a multi-vehicle driver here with quite a few problems. Superman Hopkins says, can we get more videos from Cecily? You can never go wrong with having a woman's perspective on the issues, and I totally agree. Cecily has been doing a great job. She does her rideshare news and, kind of gig economy news, food delivery news, since there have been a lot of food delivery topics every single Saturday morning. So you can check that out for now, but feel free to let me know if there's any specific types of videos. Richard says, in regards to the customer support, it takes a while to get someone on the phone. I know for a while there are a lot of issues with the phone, the kind of at-home setup for a lot of these support centers. Like, for example, if Uber has support center in the Philippines, and they're going into a call center, right, to handle all these for a few months there. All the call centers were closed, so there were some issues there. Dave, the Uber slave, says, "Look like you made Dara nervous in the interview." Yeah, it looked like he might have been sweating a little bit. But I will say, if you guys didn't catch my interview with Dara, he's a very polished CEO. But I was lucky because it was actually the second time I've been able to interview him. The first time was a few years ago at an in-person driver event in Los Angeles when they announced the new Uber driver app. I don't know if you guys remember that a few years ago, and they did this kind of big, like, sexy launch party for a driver app, which, like, frankly, no drivers really were complaining about or cared about, and kind of, I wouldn't say it was a total flop, but I think it was a very typical Uber move, a lot of hype, and hey, I wasn't going to complain because I got to interview the CEO at that point, but, I think it was not what drivers really cared about at the time. But the reason why I brought that up, Dave, is because it was, I was probably a little nervous that first time, but the second time around, I had a lot more experience, so I was ready to go, and hopefully I did a decent job. Melody says, Uber is charging $20 for a car inspection here in the Bay Area. Anyone else? So one of our affiliate partners is a company called Rideshare Mechanic, and I will put a link in the chat right now to them. But basically, they're a virtual inspection company, and so you also have to pay for them, right? Because you can't get those free inspections right now with Uber and Lyft in a lot of places. And I want to say they charge, I'll leave a link right now, you guys can check it out. I want to say it's in the like $20 to $30 range. You can also get both. Yeah, it looks like Uber is $30, Lyft is $30, and then you can do a bundle for $55. And this is a virtual inspection. So that's Rideshare Mechanic. You guys can check that out, Melody. So it's a little bit more, but it's virtual. So I think it's a lot more handy. I know Jay actually tested out and reviewed it. The one thing is it does take some time. And I heard about a new company. I want to say they're called Ride.io or something like that. That's not the name, but it's something like that I think is a little bit quicker, where you can actually send pictures in. So we'll be checking those guys out and reviewing it. But yeah, basically there are some options, Melody, some other options, but I don't know if you're going to be able to get it for free. One of my tips is if you have a friend who's a mechanic or anything like that, like they're not really like heavily checking these forms. I mean, obviously you still, want to get the inspection done from an approved mechanic, but if you know someone who's a mechanic, for example, like they can fill it out for you, maybe quickly, maybe buy them a coffee, or just as part, if you're already getting an oil change at, a Firestone or a Jiffy Lube or something like that, maybe you buy them a coffee and then ask them to do your inspection too and get it for free. So Jay says he did Rideshare Mechanic and it took about 90 minutes. So I think that's the only complaint that I've heard from some people, is that, it kind of takes a little while, even though it's virtual. I would like to see it a lot quicker. And you can kind of, there's definitely some options there. Peter says, Dara seemed to have looked at your channel. I don't know. I heard an interview he did on this podcast I really like called Pivot. And I actually did a little reaction video / podcast to this podcast, Super Meta, that'll be coming out hopefully this week. So you guys can check that out. But he does claim to read the rideshare guy. So we'll see. I think he's got bigger and better things to do, but I'm not going to complain. Cheryl says, hey, Harry, did you check out The Disrupted? I don't know. What's The Disrupted? Let me Google that real quick. What is The Disrupted? It's a documentary. What do a farmer in Kansas, a laid-off factory worker in Ohio, and an Uber driver have in common? Oh, interesting. No, I actually haven't I don't know if I've even heard about that, Cheryl, but I will definitely check that out. Jay says, let's get the likes up. Click on that thumbs up. Jay, if I would have known that you were just busy sitting at home, I would have invited you on and you could have been on here with me, but maybe next time. I appreciate you coming on either way though, Jay. And yeah, if you guys, we're at about, we're actually already at 40 minutes, so I'll go for maybe another 5-10 minutes. If you guys have made it this far, I'll do a little giveaway. I think, like I mentioned and joked earlier, a lot of us are rocking our quarantine haircuts right now. I gave myself a haircut maybe a month or two ago. I think I really need a professional haircut at this point, but I've been wearing hats a lot lately, so that's how I've been handling that. And I'll give away a couple of these nice new Rideshare Guy Flex Fit hats, which are pretty cool. So just stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes and we'll do that giveaway. A lot of questions in about the employee stuff. So I know that's a big topic, and we'll definitely, hopefully I answered everything there, but let's see if I missed. Alex said, passengers in California are complaining that they can't book short rides because no one will take them. And yeah, I agree, Alex. Now that drivers, that's sort of what I mentioned earlier, a lot of drivers in California, now that they can see the destination, those short rides suck, right? They're kind of, income killers, right? So obviously they're skipping them. I think what has happened and what Uber will probably do to sort of counter that is come out with some bonus systems like a Quest, or like the name is escaping me, the one where you select a pack, you pay a certain amount and it reduces the commission fee, but you have to, do it over 8 trips. I'm totally botching this. Jay, if you're still watching, I think the name of that program, but I think that they're going to come out with some sort of bonus programs to sort of encourage drivers to take those short trips. And it's kind of like this cat and mouse game right now. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep an eye on it. Allison says, if we become employees, how does that affect our EIDL loan if Uber is our only business? Well, if we become employee, I guess technically we are employees, but I think that will most likely, what they'll do is you won't be able to take all of this independent contractor stuff if drivers become employees. But I think that's going to be quite a while before drivers, Uber actually had to say, hey, you're an employee. It's going to be, many months. Dave says, I wish you would have asked Dara why I was permanently deactivated. Well, Dave, I thought about it. I remember you mentioning that you wanted me to ask him that. And I will say I had a feeling that he probably may not have known who Dave the Uber Slave was, unfortunately, even though you do have a great YouTube channel. But I do follow him on Twitter, so maybe I'll tweet him later for you, and he can have one of his minions look into it. Peter says, on CNBC, I heard several times someone mentioning your channel when talking about Uber. Yeah, so we ran this, we do this annual survey, and then recently we surveyed, like I said, 834 drivers or something like that, and basically found that 71% of drivers wanted to be independent contractors. And, again, I'm not making any large judgment off of that. I think that number isn't that controversial, and it kind of makes sense since most drivers are part-time. And, sort of for all the negatives of Uber, people would rather be, quote unquote independent contractors than employees. And so kind of Uber and Lyft, like a lot of the Uber and Lyft boosters, the ones that sort of don't want drivers to be employees, really love citing that stat. So I've seen Dara cite that stat a few times on a podcast, the Pivot podcast, and on Twitter, and I think some analysts and some other people have cited that stat. So it's sort of good for me and my brand in the sense that they're mentioning this, but I do feel a little bit used. But it is what it is. Papa Smurf says, how do I get the Rideshare Guy hat to buy? I think we have our trucker. I don't know if you can buy the FlexFit hats, but I think we have the trucker hats for sale. So I will leave a link to that right now. But I would also say, Papa Smurf, if you're a big Rideshare Guy fan and you can prove it, send me an email and I'll hook you up. We do need a driver in New York City to help us with some articles and some ideas and review our course. So maybe we can work out a deal later, and appreciate that though. And Superman Hopkins says, I'd love to rock that hat, but I'm black and hats aren't good for my fro. Okay, well, that's fair. I was going to say, I think hats look good on you no matter what race you are, but if you've got a fro, that might be a different story. Superman, I might mess up your hair basically. So, appreciate that. And let's see. Oh, Linda said, this was the mask question. If we're self-employed, why are we made to wear a mask? When will this mask BS be over? Any idea? Also, have you heard what Tampa Bay drivers are making a week? Not familiar with Tampa Bay specifically, but I did talk about in general how sort of earnings potential, I think, are for the most part, up across the board, because, even though demand is way down, there's still some 25% of rides are still happening, and a lot of drivers aren't driving. Right now we're starting to cover these topics, like, hey, my first week back, and kind of like definitely some drivers are starting to get back out there. But Linda, so I'll just say that personally, personally, this is actually one thing that I brought up on I think it was either my interview with Dara or another, maybe when I interviewed Andrew McDonald, who's another high up guy at Uber. And I sort of said that, well, personally, I feel that masks should be, if I'm in the car as a driver, I'm going to wear a mask. And I think the rider should wear a mask too. But as an independent contractor, I do kind of agree with you in the sense that, you shouldn't have to do anything, even if it's, I think unsafe. So that's my personal opinion that it's unsafe, but I do agree with you. And that's sort of where it gets into this really sticky situation, because if drivers are true independent contractors, they should be able to make some good choices and some bad choices, kind of on their own, set their own rates. And that's why I think it's always going to be tough for drivers to be true independent contractors, because if you go, let's say you go and don't wear a mask, you personally as a driver aren't really going to be affected. It's the Uber brand, right? Let's say the video goes viral and then no one wants to take an Uber, right? And so you could kind of imagine from the company's perspective, they have to have some control. And that's why, even though 71% of drivers want to be independent contractors, I think a large number of those 71% would say that it doesn't always feel like it's independent, because whether it's, them telling you to wear a mask, which like I said, I think is a good thing, or them telling you kind of where you should go and when you should go, right? So that's sort of the big caveat to that stat there. But yeah, let's see. Alex says, I've had 2 record-breaking weeks in the past month. I believe you're in California or maybe even Los Angeles. And let's see. Go Blue says, okay, I don't want to get into like a huge mask debate, but he says that masks don't work. And I guess what I would say is it's just like I don't know why masks, again, I don't know why masks are that controversial. It's really, you just put the mask on. It's not that hard, but it's not like you have to give a kidney. We'll leave it at that. And then let's see, what other questions do we have coming in? Andrew says, I'm in California and I see Yes on 22 ads all the time. I have a feeling Yes on 22 will pass overwhelmingly. And I actually kind of agree with you, Andrew. I think that, drivers, actually, I'm not really sure how we're doing a quick survey on Prop 22, but I do think like probably most drivers actually are a yes on 22, because that would keep drivers as independent contractors. But I'm going to guess maybe 50 to 60%. But frankly, like what drivers think about Prop 22 doesn't really matter, because this, for the most part, unfortunately, because this is a proposition that's going to be put out to all California voters. So it's sort of what California voters say. They're going to kind of be making the decision, right? And Dave says, I have a feeling too, Andrew, it's scary, but the passengers will get what they deserve. Drew says, my EDD says I'm disqualified. What do I do? So I'm assuming you're referring to some sort of assistance or unemployment that you've been getting, but maybe you can send me a little more information and I can talk about that. Go Blue says, do you see Uber requiring drivers to get the COVID-19 vaccine if it's available in November? I definitely don't see any way they could require it, but I do think in general, whenever the vaccines for COVID-19 are first available, it would kind of make sense to give them, I mean, let's face it, probably like some rich people are going to get it, but I think from there, it makes sense to give it to the people who are at highest risk. So, the ones like out and about and working, someone like if I'm sitting in my office at home all day, I probably should be one of the last people to get a vaccine versus, an Uber driver or a food delivery or a grocery worker who's like constantly exposing themselves to potential virus. So Alex says, I'm telling my passengers to vote yes. And Dave says, passengers know that no 122 is going to raise the rates. I don't think they know that. Well, I mean, they may know that, but also I think Uber's telling them that, Dave. I don't know if they know that, but I think Uber is definitely telling them that. And I think, to be frank, though, that's also true, right? Like, if drivers become employees, they're going to get paid more, and that pay has to come from somewhere. It's not, it's either Uber or, passengers. It's a pretty simple equation. So I think the argument should really be more like, hey, passengers have been paying, a reduced cost, right? Like drivers have been bearing a lot. When you go and take a $4 or $5 Uber ride, the driver's sort of getting screwed. And, frankly, like passengers have sort of gotten used to that. And so can you convince a bunch of passengers that, hey, this would be a better deal for drivers? Unfortunately, I don't know, because I think a lot of people are a bit selfish. So we'll see what happens there. A lot of Prop 22 questions, which is good. I think we'll definitely, over the next 2 months, this is going to be a big topic. So I'm sure we will keep talking about it. I want to see if there's any 1 or 2 more questions I can answer before I sign off here and do a little giveaway. Go Blue says, as a driver, do I have the liberty to allow a rider to ride without a mask? I mean, yeah, if you want to. I don't see any reason you're not going to get deactivated for. I can't imagine you would. I don't know how you would even get caught for that. But yeah, I think that's your prerogative. And Allison says, either way, riders will pay more, and that's a good thing. Andrew says, if drivers became employees by side gig, can they still keep flexibility at the same time as being employees? So I think I totally agree with you, Andrew. There's a lot of unknowns if drivers were to become employees. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys, and no one can really sit here and tell you everything about how, everything is going to be. But I think we can make some general assumptions, right? Okay, if drivers are employees, they're probably going to get paid more per hour with, a minimum wage and, kind of everything else, all the benefits that you're going to get, the reimbursements, everything we talked about. I think that's probably, a safe assumption. And because they're now getting paid more, riders are going to have to pay more for the trips. Okay. I think that's so far nothing crazy or controversial. And if, drivers are now employees, it's a lot of work to hire employees, right? It costs the companies more money. So they're going to hire, the people who are putting in whatever number of hours they deem to be most efficient, right? It's probably not going to be the people doing 5 to 10 hours a week or less. Like if you're someone who drives 5 hours a week for Uber and then takes a few weeks off and then goes back and does 10 hours, from a managerial perspective, you suck, right? I don't want to hire you because you're not very consistent. It makes me really hard for me to plan. So right, think about that concept and take it and kind of apply it to Uber. So, I think that's sort of some of the things that we might see. And to answer your question, Andrew, I think that there definitely could still be some flexibility, but it just won't be the same as exactly, what you have now. And that's sort of where, if drivers get a minimum wage, I think that you'll lose some flexibility, but it'll be a good trade-off. For now, every driver has an earnings floor, right? And the incentives are aligned. If drivers become employees, there's going to be even less flexibility. And so that's just sort of what I'm worried about, is that, hey, if we lose some flexibility, I think that's okay, right? Like you don't really need to be going out and like just flipping the app on and doing one trip and then logging off. Like that's not really the best way to drive for Uber and Lyft, even though you could do that today. But if you maybe have to schedule some shifts in advance and the shifts are doled out based on experience or rating or kind of the factors that matter to the best drivers, I think, some drivers who like shitty drivers are not going to like that. And, frankly, if you're like a 4.65 rated driver, you probably shouldn't be getting as many shifts as the driver who's 4.9 star, and done thousands of trips for the company and much more loyal. So I think that's kind of the gist of what we'll see there. Drew, I think you're still asking about that EDD question. Just email me with details and I can take a deeper look there, because I'm not sure I've seen exactly what the issue was. Dave says an earnings with guarantee is better than flexibility most days. Yeah, I mean, I think that it just depends on how much flexibility you're losing, because definitely a lot of drivers, value the flexibility, obviously. But, like I said, like most people don't need to be able to log on whenever and wherever, or one trip or two trips, but definitely having some flexibility is important. And we'll see. So Joel says, so if I drive for Uber 14 hours a week, it's my side gig. Do you think that they'll just get rid of all the drivers that do under 20 hours? So Joel, you actually, it's really tough to say. I think that people probably, 5 to 10 hours a week or less are maybe gotten rid of first. But also people that are doing 40 hours a week or more, like in California, for example, you have to pay those drivers time and a half, right? So they might limit drivers to 40 hours a week. If you do 30 hours a week or more as an employee, you have to get healthcare. So the companies could limit you to 30 hours so they don't have to pay that healthcare. So it could, and this is why I said there's so many unknowns. We really don't know. It could be a situation where like every driver has to do, 10 to 29 hours a week, no less, no more, but you have to be somewhere in that ballpark, and you do scheduled shifts, and you're an employee. I'm totally just hypothetical and brainstorming. That's sort of why I said, it's not going to be all roses as employees. There's definitely going to be some, I think, pretty major downsides that we really don't know what will happen until it all plays out. Eric says, you have no clue what you are talking about. Well, feel free, Eric, to criticize a specific point that I'm making. I'm going to disagree for now, though, since you haven't provided much context or evidence. Rideshare Source Driver says, riders will become more entitled if drivers are employees. That's interesting. I haven't thought about that. I'd be curious to know, if drivers were employees, do you think they would become more or less entitled? I'm not really sure, to be honest. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. Richard says, maybe you could try to find your own clients on Facebook or something and charge them a flat rate. That's an option. One company that I've seen talking about this is called Dumpling, Dumpling, and we did a review of them on the site. They're I want to say they're doing like more delivery and logistics stuff, but they were talking about, allowing drivers to build up their own clientele. The issue, though, is that if you're going to do it legally, you need sort of full-time commercial insurance and licensing and all this stuff. We in Austin in 2016, when Uber and Lyft pulled out of the city, there were a bunch of companies that kind of swooped in, and Arcade City, which wasn't a real company, but they were basically a Facebook group, they kind of popped on and basically connected drivers and riders in a Facebook group, and it wasn't ideal, but it worked. The only issue, though, is to build a company off of that, is all of those rides are technically illegal, and I did end up actually hearing about some busts that were happening with that. So you definitely have to understand the risk there and be careful. Still waiting on Eric to get back to me about what I have no clue about, but I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. And Richard says, if you become an employee, remember you won't get paid daily. You might get paid bi-weekly. So Richard, that's a good example where I don't know if that's traditionally that is true, obviously, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't get paid, with the same, I think that's more a relic of like a crappy employment system. One of the things that people obviously love about driving for Uber is the flexibility, but also the fact you can get paid after a single trip or after a shift, at the end of the day, whatever it is. And I think that's one thing that, they could bring over to an employee model. Okay, you do your shift as an employee, and when you're done, they pay you. I don't see why that wouldn't work as an employee. So like I said, right, I think there are a lot of unknowns. Personally, if I had to take a bet, I think more people will be sort of harmed by becoming employees than staying independent contractors. And so that's sort of why I personally have been against AB5 and drivers becoming employees. But I totally get the other side of the coin, where frankly, the 10 to 20% of drivers who are full-time and, doing 30 to 40 hours a week or more, they're doing a majority of the total hours on the platform. So I'm kind of making the argument for those guys, because they don't make the good arguments. They sort of just say, oh, we're going to keep our flexibility and everyone's going to be an employee, which is totally false. But they should definitely at least use some of the arguments I'm giving with them, even though I disagree. And I see Rideshare Professor joining late, but he's on here. I know he's been doing a lot of content on Prop 22 and drivers becoming employees. I believe you're a fan of drivers becoming employees. So if people want to learn a little bit more about that, they can head over to the Rideshare Professors channel and check that out. I think I'll answer one or two more questions. Jesse says, hourly employees are paid weekly in New York City, no more bi-weekly. I think he's referring to Uber drivers. Are you talking about Uber drivers are now paid weekly? Maybe. I don't know that I've heard that. I need to double check that, Jesse. Maybe we can chat about that on Facebook. Send me a message. Rideshare Professor says, we need to be true independent contractors. The multiplier is a step closer, but it will be gone in November. And I actually, agree with you big time, Rideshare Professor. I think just getting more, and that's sort of where I wish Uber would have come with a much better compromise in Prop 22 that actually made drivers independent contractors, because they sort of made this compromise that's kind of more of the same, right? And if they're going to call drivers independent contractors, I want them to actually treat them like it. And Jesse says, oh no, not Uber. Okay. So you might be talking about something else. And Al says, thanks for clarifying that. I saw one or two more questions I wanted to answer. Let's see. Go Blue says, any idea when UberX rides will go back to 4 riders? I think it's going to be a long time before 4 riders happen again. Because, when you think about it, right, most of 90% of the rides that you do are usually 1 or 2 people. I mean, I guess sometimes in the bars and the restaurants, Friday, Saturday nights, it's a lot of people trying to pack into one car, but I think it'll be, probably a while, honestly, a long time, until there's, a vaccine and a lot more safety around. I just don't think the upside for Uber is really there to add a 4th rider. And the same kind of goes for Uber Pool too. So Jesse, I think, is talking about W2 in general. All right, well, we're up at an hour right now, so we're going to do a little giveaway. First, I want to ask all of you, though, if you haven't given this video a thumbs up, please go ahead and do so now. I really appreciate it, and it helps spread the word to other folks. So if you're watching live on YouTube, I think you just need to X out of the chat for a second, give the video a thumbs up. If you're on another platform, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook page, we did it all today. We're streaming everywhere, and I think we actually had comments coming in from all the platforms. So that was cool to see. Just give this video a thumbs up, and feel free to, I would also ask you to share it with one other driver or one other gig worker or one other prospective driver, gig worker that you think might get some good value out of this. And I mentioned that I would do a giveaway. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give away 2 of my new flex fit hats. That these are actually pretty nice fitted. I really like these hats, and I think the theme is, since we're all here in quarantine, I know a lot of us haven't gotten a haircut. I want you to send, or if you've given yourself a nice quarantine haircut, send me an email with a photo of it, and I'll pick my favorite 2 or 3 photos and send you guys hats to cover up that quarantine haircut. Or maybe it doesn't need to be covered up, but basically email me, harry@therideshareguy.com, subject line YouTube Live, and send me a picture of your quarantine haircut that you guys have been rocking, or no haircut that you've been rocking. I've seen some funny pictures of people who have tried to give themselves haircuts, or had their spouses do it, or maybe you got a really good haircut from your spouse, or maybe you got a professional barber. But I want to see your haircuts, basically, and that'll be a fun entry tonight. harry@therideshareguy.com, subject line YouTube Live. Send me that picture of your quarantine haircut, good or bad, and I will pick, let's say, 2 winners, 2 of my favorites, and send you guys this exact hat that I'm wearing right now. Appreciate everyone. Cheryl says she shared it to the Tampa group. Rideshare Professor says thumbs up, everyone. Dave, the Uber slave, gives the peace sign, and definitely recommend. I know Dave was in here a bunch, so go check out his YouTube channel if you haven't already. Rideshare Professor has got a good YouTube channel. Real Rideshare Stories was also on here at the beginning. I don't know if there's any YouTubers I'm missing, but I highly recommend you all check out their channels. And I will be back next month, but maybe sooner if there's some big breaking news, or you guys want to hear from me more in the future. All right, take care and stay safe out there.